Hello everyone. So you're looking at the PDF version of the OverMare guide. And I'm going to preface this with telling you that this is an incredibly dense piece of reading material. It's 110 pages, but I feel like I can only read 30 or 40 pages at a time, which I think is both a positive and a negative. Expect if you have a physical copy of this, it's going to get a real workout. A real workout. Now this is by Dead Tree Studios. I did pay for my copy. However, it was mailed to me, quote, expressly as fast as possible. I'm really wondering how Little Pip made it in here and I didn't. That's funny to me. Little Pip made it in here and I didn't. Little Pip's a friend of mine. Not the Fallout Equestria character, like someone who just goes by that moniker. I honestly really hope that the other guides are made in a way that you don't need them, because this, to its credit, this book feels like it's a necessity. I feel like without having had this book, I was only running 3/4 of a game. And now I'm not. As you can see, the book does have a bunch of these little quivets by the actual OverMare who's reading it, and it's adorable, and they're annoying. They feel a little overused. I just feels like you could have not done this in so many places, but you chose to do it, and that's something we all have to live with. And then there's these little edits that she's done, like please do not, and it says please eat your manual. It gives a job description of what it is to be an OverMare, i.e. a GM. And it goes on and on and on explaining. There's definitely a real emphasis here that rule of cool and rule of fun need to be taken first. Rules as written, it even admits, just don't work sometimes. And it does tell you that you're going to have to... Part of being a GM, like, this is part of being a GM. You take time out of your week when nobody's around and are just sitting here writing up the world. The story. This is a guide on how to GM. More than a guide of how to run a Fallout Equestria game. It feels like this is a guide on how to GM with extra Fallout Equestria supplement rules tacked on at the end. I could replace Equestria and Fallout and anything and any references to either of them with just generic roleplay terms, and it work. And this is not something that you find in the D&D GM's guide that is written like this. The D&D GM's guide just kind of gives you a vague understanding. Like, there's only 10, 20 pages that actually teach you how to be a game master. And then everything else is just, good luck, here's some bunch of tables and all this other stuff. Half the Games Master's guide for D&D 3.5 was magical items. And here it's, I want to say, about 50, 60 pages of just how to GM. I can appreciate that. I've never had a book sit down and teach me how to build ecology, how to build economy, how to deal with death in the world, how to make a storyboard for characters, and how to modify the storyboard as things happen, because it emphasizes that you're going to do a lot of homework. As you can see, just making a storyboard. But how to make, like, if you're going to have a bunch of manticores, you obviously can't have anything for them not to eat. You can't make a place completely lifeless and then suddenly just throw enemies at them. You have to, like, make it seem like stuff exists. How to work on an economy and how players impact the economy, as well as how economies rise and fall in the wasteland. Like, this little section here is literal gold for a GM. If, you know, players are going to places and keep handing weapons over to settlers, well, the settlers are going to end up heavily armed, but if they're keeping all the food and then they're scavenging everywhere there's to get food, the settlers are going to end up with a lot of weapons and not a lot of food and be pissed. It even says the relationship between population sizes and their impact is worth tracking. And lastly, it denotes that everything eventually dies. And that entropy doesn't always need to be negative. Like, it notes this right here, that something dies, you have to put something in its place, because that's how things work. Who lives in, like, this is just, I could keep going on, but I feel like this entire section, all the way, I want to say all the way to page 21, just the first 20 out of 100 pages of this are just essential for every single GM to know and read and understand. And then we get to alternative rules. Hardcore bleed out, I mean, I'm not a fan of. It just seems like it makes everything too squishy. But if you want to go with it, you go with it. The long dash seems like it would be for GM and people who don't want to have to keep up with, you know, carry weight as much and just have fun and get stuff, which is fair. Onward Steed is something that I feel should just be included. It should just be assumed if you're one size category smaller, you can just jump on something and it run with you. Oxygen-rich environment makes agility more important, in my opinion. It's already a super important stat. It's not something I would have necessarily included, and it also just makes going first much more important because of the sheer number of additional actions you're going to get. And again, this one I'm not a fan of. So this is a mixed bag. Like, this is my opinions. I understand that some people want to have the extra agility points. I understand that some people want agility to matter even more than it already does. I understand some people want that hardcore bang, he's dying. But I don't know how I feel about it. Increasing, like, survival yield, it gives the GM more work because you're going to have to figure out more than 5 to 8 pieces of stuff that they get from scavenging a house, and it gives it gives more logistics, but it gives the players more flexibility and makes the game feel less survival-y. Making weather directly affect combat. Weird. It's not something I would have expected. Style dice, I honestly just don't think that's needed. I think that's a great flavor, but when it comes down to it, the sheer amount of damage that creatures and characters and everyone just outputs is obscene. And I really don't think that style dice are needed for this game, but if you want to have them, you clearly just want players to be much more descriptive with their combat, and as well as you want, like, rolling 6 degrees of success to matter more. And I'm going to go over each of these alternative rules. Waste of Ages. Twice the loot and twice the danger. Encounters in this game take some getting used to, and without players who are well drilled for it, this is not something I can recommend, because if you're going to put twice the danger, you need some well drilled players who know what they're doing. The increased reserve, I don't know why this is not a thing to begin with. I mean, I get that NPCs can do it back to the players, but I don't understand why and checkmate is just not the core base rule. But I also understand for balance purposes it makes sense to not be able to reserve your entire AP pool. But this, I feel like this should be an option that just says delay. Actual rules for pregnancy. I'm sorry, this should have been in the base game. This is the Wasteland. I'm going to stare at you with a straight face now and tell you this should have been in the base game. No questions asked. There's literally a series of perks that are strictly for seducing people and getting them in bed. Why this was not included in the base game, I don't know. But it should have been. I don't necessarily agree with the rationing part. Unless you're like giving it to a smaller creature who doesn't need as much. I think that there's plenty of drugs to go around and plenty of ways to make them. This is just an incentive for characters to use more drugs. That's my opinion. The glowing one and I just firmly believe this should be how... I always thought this was just how a glowing one worked. That's how I built my glowing ones. Life is cheap. If you have players who don't mind, chewing through characters quickly. Chem smoker, why are cigars and cigarettes not treated like chems in the first place? I like this. This should be this shouldn't be an alternative rule. This should be a FAQ. This is how stuff works now. Boozy Wasteland. I love this. This is so much fun. It is just a shitload of fun to realize how different boozes affect people. And how much booze you have per bottle, really. It is a ton of fucking fun just to have this. And then to have the motivation that you can drink booze to get rid of rads. Or you can drink booze to get healing effect. So here's alcohol. I just feel like, a lot of people in the Wasteland would indulge in alcohol quite often because, let's face it, the Wasteland sucks. And this is kind of a cool thing to have done, to actually planned out, well, booze 1 does X, booze 2 does Y. Levels beyond 30. This is something that I'm going to be a little controversial about. It is my opinion that they built the game to go to 30 for a reason. Because even at 20, things are ridiculous. Going past 30 should only be done with the understanding that you're going to be the Space Marines of the Wasteland. The legendary area, these legendary rules, I firmly think that regardless of which one you pick, if you pick any of them, because you don't have to use any of them, it's just for people who want to play Space Marines and Fallout. Because any normal raiders, any normal enemies, anything that's like below level 20 is just going to get wholesale slaughtered by characters at level 30, much less for characters who are now going beyond level 30. If I had to pick one, I would kind of... I would honestly probably go with Tavern-Wide Legend. Because skill points should have a limit. Getting extra perks makes sense. Getting new traits just seems like you're being ridiculous and overpowered just to be overpowered. So there's definitely a power fantasy here versus a let's have fun and make you work for it versus a relatively balanced one versus a just throw in extra levels past 30. Sanity rules. Why aren't these in like every Fallout game? Why can't you just go insane? These are awesome. These force people to roleplay who would normally not roleplay. This is taking... I firmly, undoubtedly believe that these can bring players to whole new heights or show them utter flaws in the way they play their characters. That much said, I don't agree with a few things. How quickly they heal, how few you actually have, and just the fact that I feel like you need to have a bit more flexibility for players when it comes to sanity rules. It's my opinion. I understand that is my opinion, and I understand that my opinion is not word of law, and it is not God. But I undoubtedly, at the end of the day, believe that you should have more sanity than this as just a functioning person in the wasteland to begin with, because you should be really jaded to the wasteland. Now, pre-war characters, no, their sanity should be limited like this. But people who have grown up in the wasteland should be able to take a little more. I, however, like the aspect of how it just goes straight into the what I would consider straight into the horror dimension, because you see immediately here mentioned Eldritch, and then down here there is a benefit to going nuts, but you can't go completely insane. You have to stay above 0. We learned this Saturday. Like, my character was playing with these rules and came very close to this 0, and I had an out to prevent total insanity. I like the fact that people who are insane can go above their racial maximum and their maximum for their skills, because insane people see things vastly differently and are able to do things with their bodies that a lot of the times they shouldn't be able to do. I also like how it advises you in kind of a paranoid state. I mean, your insanity could be different, but it kind of advises you on how your character should feel when they start getting to these points. You shouldn't just be the triumphant, I don't care that I'm losing my mind. You should start acting differently. And I approve of that. But yeah, this is great. I like it. They could do with some more balance and some more modifications. I think that if you're going to use these where you have sanity at 0, you should have like information for the GM to give negative flaws, negative traits, to a player who achieves certain levels of insanity. Like 25 to 0 or hitting 0, you should start achieving some traits there that the GM should be able just to hand out, like trauma or psychological disorders or physical disorders that are psychologically induced, things that people have to now deal with and overcome. This is very Call of Cthulhu-esque, and part of Fallout was designed off of Call of Cthulhu, so yeah, I don't know why this isn't in more Fallout references and more Fallout games. Oh, and now we get to the rule of cool. A lot of people I have met try to interpret games literally for the rules. They're often not very good GMs. Like how this says cheating, they mean cheating. No, they don't. Rules were written under ideal circumstances, and usually A plus B equals C. There are environments in which A, B, X, Z, M, N equals C, and now you have to figure out what do they actually, what is C now? Because all of these other elements are going on that were not accounted for when the rules were made. That said, rule of fun and rule of cool should take precedent. Unless it's leading directly to a player character's death, I agree with the rule disagreement here. Unless it's leading directly to a player character's disagreement, you should take no more than a few seconds to look them up. Or if you have to make a ruling on the fly, you make a ruling on the fly and you write down what you ruled and why you ruled it, so that later, when that comes up again, you can point to it and say, we've already done this. Oh, don't be afraid to say no. Fuck. I'm a GM. I say no to everything. Like, my base instinct is to say no. Characters need to justify why they do things and why they have things. End of discussion. So, yes, it can dampen their enthusiasm, but If you say no a lot and they expect you to say no, they will work very hard to make you say yes. And that's important because it invests them in their character. So I don't think this should say don't be afraid to say no. I think it should say no to everything until they justify it. That's my opinion. That's how I GM. This is a different GMing style, and this is a much more easygoing GM style. And this also informs, an improvisation section effectively informs you that no plan you ever make will survive contact with the players. It won't happen. You need to be prepared to just go off the rails for a while and try to figure out how to get the train back to the rails eventually. And then, you know, review your homework. And remember that you're herding cats when it comes to players. They can be absent-minded. They'll forget things. They're not their characters 24/7. They have not fully prepared everything. You need to ask them, would your character have done this? Don't just jump on them and go, you know, you forgot to da-da-da-da-da. No, that's not how it works. We're not our characters 24/7 as players. It just doesn't happen. And this is reminding you that players are not their characters 24/7. Things their character would do are not necessarily things they will think about. Do you put the toilet seat down? Is a very good example. So before you jump on a player's case, just be reminded, hey, yo, I know you're paying attention to the shiny, I know you're trying to get to the adventure part, but I need some details. And Session 0 is something that a lot of people don't do. I do it on my channel with every new game we start. We have a Session 0 where players do character tryouts, and the GM explains the game to the players. And everybody sets their limits. This is Fallout. This is supposed to be grim and dark and gritty and horrible. And your players have to overcome that. You need to make sure that you aren't going to be pressing buttons that don't need to be pressed. I mean, you don't know if you have a rape, just as an example, you don't know if you have a rape victim at your table. Describing ponies being raped by raiders is probably not okay. It just needs to be something that you mention as being assumed. This is just one for instance. But you need to make sure that when players sit at the table, you need to ask, do you guys have any limits? Do you guys have things that I should never do? And do you guys have things that you want to have happen? I hate power fantasies, and I hate Munchkin games. Here's the rules for how to do them. If your players are interested in that, I personally am not. I never have been. And yeah, your job is to make... I'm going to say this right now. You as a GM a lot of the times won't have fun. But it's very rewarding if you enjoy making sure others have fun. It's very rewarding. And this is telling you that information. You're here to run the world, and you're here to help your players. So like I said, the first like huge chunk of this is just information. Alternative rules, how to build those rules, how to build encounters, how to do all of these things that you need to do as a GM to make your world immersive, awesome, and make your games last for years. Then there's these huge tables that you can just go through and get stuff ready to... When you like go, here's a room, instead of rolling for loot, here's all the tables, roll beforehand and just have the room set up. Imagine, or you know, you have these tables of things you could give the players, just imagine what should be there. And therefore the players can come in and look at it. And as I said, there's references to things like the dev game in here, Rep Buddy, that we run on Wednesday night. But there's all of these different tables for you to go through and pick out things that players, instead of just having one big table that's kind of like really random, this is virtually every single item in the game so far in a table that you can go find, hand to the players, and be like, here. Information on weapons, armor, tiered weapons and armor, how to issue it. I like these tables. It makes my job as a GM easier, and this will certainly make your job as a GM a whole lot easier. If you strictly abide by the table. Remember, fudge your rolls sometimes. You don't need to be issuing balefire egg launchers like candy. And then, you know, when you issue a hunting revolver, you just issue the appropriate ammo with it. Not much, but enough. Hats are not helmets, by the way. And so I'm going to skip to the end of these tables. As you can see, we're going through the book, little piece by little piece. This is something that I'm like, why is this not in the WSG? Why is this not in the Wasteland Survival Guide? All the environmental hazards and player-created hazards that you can run into. Right here. Right now. This is so useful. Because remember, the Wasteland is trying to kill them as much as creatures are. Them running into a radiation storm or a magic storm is just as lethal as throwing a rad scorpion at them. It could be even more lethal if they're completely unprepared for it. Look at what your players are prepared for. Are they, you know, packing all the heat and then packing nothing to help them out with the environment? Think about it. This gives you so many options as a GM to throw things at players that they may not be prepared for, or that they may have to improvise some sort of preparation. Having characters stay up for days on end, for instance, is torture. And you could even, you know, go back to those insanity rules and start applying sanity effects to your characters. Remember, you don't have to have them keep track of their sanity. You can do it. And that's something mentioned in the rules above. This is just an example. There is, when I said this was dense reading, I really advise people to read 20 pages at most when reading this book. And I advise GMs to read the entire book over the course of a week, just to give you an idea of everything that's in here. The taint table finally being at our fingertips, truly something we wanted. And now we can touch it and look at it and just smile. Gem list of how gems work and how they can, you know, be used in different craftings. Seriously. Just run with it. And lastly, we come to legendary items. This part I was looking forward to. Me as a player, when I pick up a gun and it is my character's gun, that's the gun I'm going to be using from level 1 to 30. Just because I find a nicer shotgun does not mean I'm going to throw that gun down, because me as a character, this pump action shotgun has seen me through all of this horrible, terrible, awful stuff. Why would I get rid of the thing that has served me so well as a person just because I found a fancier shotgun? That doesn't happen in real life. Like, when your gun gets broken, you fix it. And players who take the time to do this sort of stuff, I mean, you can have a rank 3 Earth Pony Artisan, or have an enchanted item, or use the modification that you keep doing stuff to your gun to make it bigger and better, and you keep doing stuff to your gun because it's yours and you've kept it for so long that you can put a legendary effect on it now because it provides you something awesome. You've put that much work into it. And so, also as a GM, you can just create new effects. Like, I don't see any legendary armor effects here that just add a flat amount of DT or just overall DR. Maybe you add one. Make it expensive. Maybe you add something else. The point here being, armor that can normally stop a bullet can now suddenly stop a bullet. Expect a rumor to spread of the legendary armor fridge. Think about it. Example. I'm going to talk to Moon about my character's shotgun. Because at this point, I don't think I can put... There's no other upgrades I could truly put on it. But I don't want to get rid of it. It's her shotgun. It's the first weapon she goes to when she wants to use it. And this right here informing you that, you know, rumors can create legendary weapons in the wasteland. Maybe I should talk to Moon. See if I can add something to the shotgun. Just as an example. And then creating MacGuffins. Things that are rare and unusual and weird, and how to make them. Right here. How to create a quest item. How to create something that players are going to be going after for many sessions. If they're going after an item. And the effects of the item ranging from, you know, it's a muffin tin. To it's diamond-tipped tools for weapons and equipment. Think about it. There's just a whole mess of stuff you could get in here. So, in my opinion, this book is required. The player creation guide, I could deal without. I could throw it aside and not even care. And never use it. It's good fluff. It's good fun. It's useful for newer players, but me being a veteran player of dozens of RPGs and of this game now, having played it for more than a year, I would never pick it up and look at it. This book will be open more than my WSG. Particularly when I'm running Saturday games, the pick up and play games, this book will just be open on my desk at all times. This book will never get closed. Period. It's that valuable, it's that important that this book stay open. I don't know about the Hiptocuffs, I don't know about the Lock Safe, I don't know about the Gilded Cage yet, but I know this book stays open. I'm really hoping for the Gilded Cage next, because a monster guide would be pivotal to this game for expansion purposes. So I would have to stop just making monsters. But this, if you're going to be a GM, or hell, if you're going to be a player, this is a required book in my opinion. Yes, it has its faults. There's some that, like, over half of the book is just telling the GM how to run a better game. More than half the book is that. Telling the GM how stables function and how taint functions. Fair enough. Something you need to have. But I honestly like it. I like how it tells you stable dwellers should be rare. I like how it tells you, you know, how to build a custom stable. But at the same time, I hate some of the alternative rules, particularly for, like, death. Because it just makes it feel like player characters are cheap and disposable. And to GMs, they may be cheap and disposable. To players, they're not. So it's kind of that coin you don't want to flip. So these are great ideas for you to implement in your game if you're going to do it from the start with the players agreeing. But if you're not starting a new game, a lot of these alternative rules are useless. Sanity rules can just be thrown in at any time, and I like that. They are literally designed just to be thrown in, and the players don't have to keep track of it. The GM can do it all on their own. But more importantly, if I was going to GM D&D, and I had never GM'd a game before, I would want someone to hand me this book. If I knew a new GM to any rule system whatsoever, I'm going to hand them this book first. Because the vast majority of this book, the entirety of the first 32 pages, can apply to any system. Literally, how to be a GM. And it's something we all need. As players and GM, as a GM, it's something you just need. To have had someone walk me through like this and guide me on how to be a GM, I imagine many of my older games would not have been as shitty as they were, would not have been as fly by the pants as they were, and would have actually kept players interested longer. And kept me interested longer. So hey guys, hope you all enjoyed it. I like my sunrise. Yay, sunrise. I know I'm invested in this game system a lot, but at the same time, I think it's a good game system. As I said, I don't get my PDFs for free. I have to pay for them just like you guys. So you know that what I'm saying, you can take with a grain of salt on one hand, and that Dead Tree sponsors me. But on the other hand, you know they don't give me money. And they don't give me free stuff. They just give me a dev who comes on and runs what I consider one of the most amazing games I've ever been a part of. But yeah, I don't think the Guide to OverMare is essential. Hell, it's a great laugh, but I personally could have done without buying it. But the OverMare's Guide, book we just reviewed, you're going to play this game, you're going to run this game, you better own one. Flat out. I like the hardback copy. I like the fact that it's obnoxious Stable-Tec blue and yellow, or obnoxious Vault-Tec blue and yellow. I love that book. It's a great piece of Wasteland usefulness. And if you're gonna play, you better have one. Just flat out. If you're gonna be a GM, or you're looking at being a GM, just sitting down for a week and reading it, actually reading it, will make you a better GM. That's my final say. I know I came in and gave more words. Deal with it. In the meantime, I will see you guys on Wednesday nights for Fallout Equestria Dead Tree, where we can see the fate of this obnoxiously green pony. Good night, everybody.